So, what if all the chaos and confusion we see in the world, from messy politics to broken relationships, what if it all comes from a single root cause? In this explainer, we're diving into a pretty powerful argument that says our modern problems really kicked off when we started rewriting some very ancient rules. Let's see what that's all about.
Right off the bat, the source we're looking at pulls absolutely no punches. It opens with this really stark assessment. The argument is that the issues we see every day, the dishonesty, the iffy leadership, just that general coldness in how we treat each other, they aren't just a bunch of separate problems. Nope. They're actually seen as symptoms of a much deeper spiritual unraveling of our society.
So what's the diagnosis here? Well, the source argues that we love to point fingers at politics or the economy, but the real issue is a moral one. The central idea is that by turning away from a fixed, divinely given set of laws, society has, fundamentally lost its compass.
And this brings us to the absolute core of the argument. It's not just about people flat out rejecting the commandments. It's about something more subtle, how we can kind of rewrite them to fit our own lifestyles. So how exactly are these ancient rules getting rationalized today? Let's break down a few examples.
Okay, let's start with a big one, right? A commandment that seems pretty black and white. But the argument here is that modern culture has found some clever ways to create loopholes, and in doing so, it fundamentally changes what the rule even means. And here you can really see the clash in worldviews. The modern rewrite, it focuses entirely on the physical act. If there's no action, there's no foul. But the rebuttal, drawing from Scripture, shifts the focus completely inward. It proposes a much, much stricter standard where the internal thought, the lust itself, is considered a violation of the commandment's spirit. It's a huge shift from policing actions to policing intent.
All right, this pattern of reinterpretation continues with another one that seems super simple: don't steal. On the surface, it's totally straightforward, but let's see how the source argues this one gets rewritten in modern life.
What's so fascinating here is the psychology behind the rewrite. It's often framed as a kind of justice, right? The company is huge, or my taxes are unfair. So these small thefts feel like you're just leveling the playing field. But the rebuttal doesn't care about scale. Not at all. It argues for absolute integrity, claiming that any dishonesty, whether it's big or small, compromises your trustworthiness.
For our final example in this section, we're tackling truthfulness itself. That's a cornerstone of any moral code. The argument is that this fundamental rule has also been seriously watered down by modern justifications.
We've all heard the justification for the white lie, haven't we? It's just a small thing, to keep the peace, to not hurt someone's feelings. But from the scriptural perspective presented here, there's just no such thing as a harmless lie. The rebuttal is pretty severe. Every lie, no matter how small you think it is, aligns with what Scripture calls the father of it, which frames even tiny deceptions as being morally significant.
So, after looking at these specific examples of rewritten rules, the source zooms out to ask a much, much bigger question. How are we supposed to interpret the massive social changes of the last few decades? It presents two completely opposing ways of looking at it.
And this slide, this really gets to the heart of the modern culture clash. On one hand, you have the view that, hey, we're evolving, we're shedding these outdated, restrictive rules and becoming more enlightened. But on the other hand, you have the view that we're in a total freefall, abandoning the very framework that once gave us stability. So which is it, progress or decline? This slide just lays out the two opposing worldviews perfectly, side by side. Look at this. The exact same concepts are given completely different labels. What the secular view calls sexual liberation, the scriptural view calls moral collapse. What one side calls personal autonomy, the other calls rebellion against God. It's the same social data, just interpreted through two radically different lenses, leading to totally opposite conclusions.
So, if the diagnosis is moral chaos caused by rewriting the rules, what's the solution? The source doesn't just point out the problem, it actually offers a framework for understanding why these divine rules were set up in the first place.
This slide gets to what the source calls the core truth. From this perspective, the ultimate problem isn't just breaking a specific rule. It's the act of substitution, of taking a divine standard and replacing it with your own judgment. The ultimate transgression, then, is simply replacing God's will with our own. And this leads to a really powerful metaphor, this idea of freedom's fences. The point is to completely reframe how we see these commandments. So instead of seeing them as restrictive prison bars that limit you, this perspective sees them as protective fences. They're not there to keep you in, they're there to keep danger out. True freedom, in this view, isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about having the wisdom to stay inside the boundaries that protect you from self-destruction. And the source wraps up with this really evocative couplet from a personal poem. It just captures that whole journey of straying from these protective fences, but also the possibility of coming back. It perfectly sums up the core argument, the choice between a morality we create for ourselves and one that is given to us. And ultimately, it leaves us with the central question of this whole text. Are rules a cage, or are they a guide path home?